Hello everyone, so I've just finished painting another unit of Zulus, and if you were paying attention in my last video on Zulus, you might have heard me say that I was going to blitz the 60 remaining figures that I needed to get to my target of an army of 400 figures, and there are only 28 figures here plus the Induna at the front, so I'm 32 figures short. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So these are more Warlord figures. I've shown you lots of these already, so I won't go into too much detail on them again, except to say that 32 figures short, that represents a box of Warlord plastic Zulus, and I was fully intending to paint 60 figures, and I can't find 32 of them, so I either miscounted, which is I think the most likely probability, or I've mislaid a box of 32 plastic Zulus somewhere, but I really have to be honest, I just could not be bothered to make too much of an effort to find them. I more or less reached the end of my enthusiasm for painting these Warlord plastics now. I'm not tired of, normally you'd hear people say, oh, they're sick and tired of painting Zulus because you have to paint so many of them and it can get quite monotonous. I've actually grown tired of painting these specific Warlord plastics. I think what I did was, because I didn't paint 32 at a time, sometimes I was painting 40 and so on, I ended up with a box that I hadn't thrown away, that I assumed there were figures in and counted those into my equation. But I've reached the limit, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. I've reached the limit of the sort of permutations of bodies and torsos with heads and weapons and so on that I can satisfactorily reach, and I just don't want to purchase another box of Warlord plastics just to make up the army now. To give you a lot of examples, and I mean, plastics are supposed to give you, this is supposed to be one of their huge benefits, and it is, of being able to give you a variety of poses and so on cheaply, and they have certainly done that, so I'm not complaining. But I've found a lot of things. Each one of these stands each one of these bases has 4 figures on it. In the box you get 4 separate poses that you can then attach arms and heads to. You have the choice of either putting the same pose on a base, or if you're basing up for black powder, and let's face it, these figures are marketed with black powder in mind. If you put 4 to a base and you put one of each of the individual poses on that base, so that there's not a replication of the pose, then I think you end up with a very kind of unnatural looking group of figures. One of them is running, one of them is sort of leaning forwards, one of them is just sort of threatening slightly, and one of them is looking a little bit more energetic. But they don't go together as a group, and there's nothing you can do about that. You have the option of doing this, or having, say, a group with several figures running, but they're all running with their legs and feet and arms in exactly the same place, and that to me doesn't look right either. So I've been a little bit dissatisfied with that as I've gone on. These figures are from the, let me see, they're from the unmarried box set. But I've taken a lot of, and this is one of the big advantages of plastic, I wanted them to be a married Zulu unit, so I've taken a lot of the heads from the married Zulu box and used those, because you get a surplus of heads. So a lot of them have got the ring around their heads. I think it's called the Izzy Godlow, something like that. And then I've used a lot of the heads from the unmarried box set that I thought are more suitable for married regiments. So ones that have got a lot more feathers and ornamentation in their hair. So that is an advantage of plastics, that you can do that. But one of the things I'm keen to do when I purchase and paint Zulu figures is never to include muskets and rifles with them, or to keep that very limited, because I think it limits your ability to be able to play these Zulus at an earlier period than the Anglo-Zulu Wars. So I'm constrained by my own choices, in a way, that I don't want to use the arms that are holding muskets. Another problem, or another kind of constraint that I try to impose on myself, is that if a figure has a cowtail on his arm, so this figure here has a cowtail on his right arm, I want to match that by having a cowtail on his left arm, and I've succeeded with this figure. But if you do that, you find your options from the box often compel you to give the figure the knobkerrie rather than an assegai or a throwing spear, and you end up with an awful lot of figures carrying a knobkerrie, and I much prefer the ones with the assegai. On top of that, you have a lot of left arms carrying a shield. Let's see if I can find one. Here's one here. So this figure here, carrying a shield, but also in the same hand carrying a knobkerrie behind the shield. That means that there's no way that you can give them a right arm that's carrying a knobkerrie. There's no reason why they would be carrying two knobkerries. And again, that limits your choices if you want to keep the figure with a cowtail on both his left and right arm. And I ran out of options, and some of these figures I had to kind of relent, and some of them have got a cowtail on one arm and not the other, and I'm not particularly happy with that. So all in all, I've kind of run out. I've exhausted the variants that I can do with these figures, and there's a few things I'm not particularly happy with. The fact that so many figures are given feathers and lots of ornamentation. I don't think that's how the Zulu army presented itself in battle. And a final thing that really kind of is really beginning to irk me about these figures is that each box comes with a metal figure from Empress. I really like the Empress figures, but you only get one type of Induna for the married, and one type for the unmarried, and you simply do not need an Induna for every 32 figures in the Black Powder Rules, and I just don't understand. What they should really have done was produced a box of plastic figures that were just command. They could have had a really nice little selection of individual figures, command stands, command figures, witch doctors, characters, say, wounded, things like that. And maybe not had 32 figures in the box, maybe only had 20, made it a little bit cheaper. But anyway, so that's me done with Warlord plastic Zulus now. I've got plenty of them, and I'm not gonna get any more. But I'm perfectly happy with the ones I've got, and they were really cheap and good way to flush out my army. So I'm 32 figures short. What do I do to make up my shortfall? I originally intended to purchase 32 figures from Empress because I really like Empress's Metal Zulu range, and they do a sort of unit deal where you can buy 16 figures for £22, and I was all set to get 2 of those unit deals, so pay £44 and get my final 32 figures. And I really like the Empress figures. I think they are far more realistic in their dress, in their poses and so on. There's a good amount of variance. You can buy them as married or unmarried, advancing or doing, I don't know what the kind of pose is, but there's variance in the pose, slight variance in the way they're dressed, but they're not overdone. They haven't got loads on their heads or anything like that. And I was about to do that, and I suddenly thought, why not have another look at the Perry plastic box set that came out about 6 months ago? Originally, because of the issues I had with Warlord plastics, I thought I wouldn't do it, because I knew that in their box set they included about 4 casualty figures, and I thought they would have a box set of 32 figures, 4 of them would be casualties. I'd still be 4 figures short to make up my army. But I had a look at them. I had a look on the website again, and discovered that there's actually 38 figures in their box set. I've got it in front of me here, but it's too big. I've got a too close range on my camera here, so it's too big to fit into the camera lens. But there's 38. To cut the long story short, I bought the Perry plastic box set, and there's 38 figures in it. So I've got more than I need. So 4 of them are casualties. So I'll have 34 figures. And what I really like I haven't really properly opened them up yet, but what I really like now, with the description on the box, and I'll read it out to you. This box allows you to fill 34 hard plastic 28mm pose Zulu warriors, 28mm multi-pose Zulu warriors with an additional 4 casualties. Fine. All are dressed for campaign, i.e. minimal ceremonial regalia. Exactly what I'm saying about these Warlord figures. What's wrong with these Warlord figures? So they've got minimal feathers and ornaments on them. Perfect. And it says, which additionally makes them quicker to paint. They can be assembled as either married or unmarried regiments. Brilliant. So I'm going to paint them all up as unmarried. So there is sufficient, even though they only do 1 box set, there are sufficient in there to give me an entire box of married figures, all armed with spear knobkery or with up to 10 carrying firearms. That means that I will be able to completely ignore the 10 firearms. So I have got enough spears and knobkeries to give them all spears and knobkeries. Again, that's something that was a problem with these Warlord figures. So that's brilliant. Although they are primarily designed for the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, they can be used for the greater part of the 19th century fighting neighbouring tribes as well as their own civil wars on the Boers. So all the sort of minor criticisms that I have with Warlord, Perry have addressed, and I think that's fantastic. What a shame that they only released this box about 6 months or so ago. Otherwise, I think I would have a lot more of these plastic Perrys in my army. But I certainly haven't finished with my Zulu army. 400 figures was my target, but there's nothing to stop me enlarging that army still further in the future. And I think Perry is the way I'm going to go, because, as I say, it would have cost me £44 to buy 32 Empress figures. The Perry miniatures have 34 figures in them plus 4 casualties. They only cost £20. So you'll be seeing what I do with these figures in a future video. It might be a couple of months, because I've got lots of other things on my tabletop and lots of other distractions, but certainly nearing the end anyway. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.